Hey guys, so tonight we're going to talk about grace. When I hear the word grace, I'm reminded of a specific story. So in 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about this thorn that's being placed in his side. And we don't know what this thorn is. It could be a situation, it could be a person, it could be something that he's dealing with internally. But it's something going on that he actually asked God to take it away from him. And it says that he's prayed 3 different times for God to take it away. And this is how God responds to taking away this thorn that's causing Paul a lot of discomfort. It says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weaknesses." Now, we may identify with Paul, right? So if his thorn was something that was a nuisance to him, a situation, a person, something on the inside, that was bothering him, I think we all can identify with this and say there's something in our lives that we've experienced that have been thorns. We also may have responded like Paul as well and said, God, can you please take this thing away from me? Some of us may actually be saying, God, with this pandemic, this is a thorn in my flesh. Can you take this thing away from me? But we also see that God didn't choose to take away the thorn, but he chose to respond with his grace being enough in the midst of it. See, no matter how bad Paul's thorn got in his flesh, God's grace was actually more than enough to meet all of the needs that Paul had. And not only was God's grace more than enough, God's grace actually changed Paul's perspective in the midst of his thorn being in his flesh. It continues on in verse 9. It says, "So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me." See, I think many times, and I know I do this in my life, when I have thorns and I have things in my life that I just want to get rid of, it's causing me discomfort. It's getting on my nerves. It's actually exposing weaknesses that I have. I want to get rid of it. I just want God to take it and just destroy it because I want it to be gone. But I think it's a lesson that we can see about God's grace in this situation with Paul, that God actually uses this to highlight his weaknesses so that God himself can be praised. See, Paul's perspective was changed because he saw his thorn as an opportunity to show that God's power is greater than he can ever think or imagine. And it is through God's grace, giving him what he does not deserve, is actually blowing up and causing him to view God and his circumstances in such a different light. It continues on to verse 10 and says, "That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Maybe thorns in our flesh aren't actually nuisances, but they're opportunities for God to show his power in our lives. When we're confronted and our weaknesses are on full display, what happens is we step back and we go, God, you know what? You have to do it because I can't. And then when God steps into the situation, his grace shines through. And we're able to see, and everyone is able to see just exactly what God can do in our lives. And keeping with this concept of grace, Smedes wrote something, and it says, "The reality of Jesus transformed the cliche of grace into the reality of God. Coming into our time, our history, our lives to make things right at the center. He came as a living person called Jesus, talking, hurting, and dying, but also coming to life again. His mission was to bring grace to the world, and so in the deepest reality to make all right precisely when everything is all wrong." See, grace is literally Jesus Christ. He is the embodiment of grace. See, grace means getting what we don't deserve. And Jesus is literally an example of us getting what we don't deserve. Because of our sin, we deserve judgment. Because of our rebellion, we deserve judgment. But in the midst of our sin, Jesus Christ came down and died for us through his grace so that we can have the forgiveness of sins. And not only will we have forgiveness of sins, we can also experience his grace every single day because he never runs out of it. So have you experienced the grace of God in your life? Are thorns too big in your life for you to feel like you can get past them? Are there thorns in your life right now that you feel like you just want God to take away, but he doesn't seem like he's going to take it away? Can you see that God's grace is all that you need? Because it is. It's more than enough to get us through situations. Will you experience God's grace in the midst of your thorn? We love you. Can't wait to connect with you soon.